How far was Vietnam Johnson's war? The escalation of US involvement in Vietnam that occurred after Johnson inherited it from Kennedy could be down to many different factors. Some may argue it was fully down to Johnson, but others may argue that many other factors were also responsible for the escalation. This essay will discuss how far Vietnam was Johnson's war, including factors such as his decisions, his influence from advisers and the government, the alternative advice given to him, the influence of the public and press, and Johnson's personality. My final judgment will be that Vietnam was to quite a large extent Johnson's war. However, he isn't completely responsible, as he had extreme external influences that led him to these decisions. The most important reason for this judgment is that it was his orders that led to the escalation. The most important reason why Vietnam was significantly held to the responsibility of Johnson is because it was his orders that led to the escalation, and the final decision to get involved came down to him. It was his decision to continue Kennedy's commitment and then subsequently to escalate it. His escalatory steps came in the form of Operation Rolling Thunder. This involved Johnson calling for greatly increased air attacks in order to bomb supply routes, decrease infiltration from the north, and demoralize Hanoi and revitalize Saigon. This suggests Vietnam was Johnson's war because it shows that it was his orders given by him that resulted in this drastic increase in involvement. The air attacks that were part of Operation Rolling Thunder resulted in an enormous amount of damage on a huge scale. This warfare was carried out at the orders from Johnson himself, showing that he had significant responsibility for the war, as the attacks couldn't have happened if he hadn't have given the orders. Please be aware he is Commander-in-Chief as the President. However, Johnson did have highly influential advisers, along with support from his government, that drove him to make these decisions. He inherited Vietnam from Kennedy after his assassination and was therefore bound to continue his policies and keep his advisers such as McNamara and Rusk, who urged him to escalate the war. As well as this, Johnson also had the support from Congress in the form of a grant of $700 million in 1965. Congress additionally passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which allowed Johnson to have the power to take all necessary measures to prevent further aggression and achieve peace and security. Further political support came from the House of Representatives, who voted in favour of escalation, 408 to 7. All of these factors are significant because they show that Johnson was heavily pressured into taking the decisions he did in Vietnam. Congress gave him the power to take the matters further, and his advisers substantially encouraged him to use these powers. This major support and encouragement he received shows that Johnson is not the only person to be held responsible for escalation of Vietnam. It shows that some of the responsibility must be shared with his advisers, Congress, and the House of Representatives. However, this only gave him the power to act. It was still Johnson's choice to decide to use this power or not, still making him more responsible for the war. There was a degree of personal culpability. Despite the encouragement from his advisers, Johnson had also had alternative advice. He was warned by others that further escalation might not be the most wise decision. Taylor warned Johnson that once US forces were committed, more would have to be sent to protect them. This shows another important reason was why Vietnam was mainly Johnson's war, because he was informed of the other side of the argument but chose to ignore it. It puts more responsibility on his shoulders and takes more away from the advisers and support, as previously mentioned, because it shows that he did have the option to ignore his advisers and listen to others who advised him to take an alternative course of action and withdraw. This therefore shows that he had a choice in what to do, but he ultimately decided to escalate. However, Johnson was also under a lot of pressure from the public and the press. He knew that withdrawal would make him unpopular, and proof of this came in the form of his victory in the 1964 election, as it showed he was able to gain votes through appearing to be tough. Over the Gulf of Tonkin incident, for example. Further evidence of public support in escalating action in Vietnam was shown in 1965, when opinion polls showed that he had 70% support for his actions. The press were also on his side at the time of escalation in early 1965. This shows further pressures that were put on Johnson to escalate the war. The public wanted it, and so did the press. This is significant because the press were hugely influential at the time, not only directly to politics but also to public opinion. These factors combined meant that Johnson was burdened further to take more action, therefore relieving him of some of the responsibility. Another aspect of Johnson's involvement in Vietnam was his personality. Some have argued that Johnson had a combative personality. This would therefore suggest that as an aggressive man he would inevitably escalate the war and seek a military solution instead of a diplomatic one. This shows another way that Vietnam could be interpreted as Johnson's war, because it shows how his personality may have led him to increase military involvement. It suggests this may be the reason why he took the military option offered to him, as opposed to the alternatives he was also advised about. This therefore would place more responsibility on him, as it suggests he freely opted to take the course his advisers gave him, as opposed to him being pressured harshly into taking this option. However, this is the least important factor, because regardless of whether his decision was to do with who advised more persuasively or whether he was more inclined to take the combative approach, he still made that decision, and he gave those orders. To conclude, my final judgment is that despite the fact that external influences such as his advisers or the support of Congress, Vietnam was mainly Johnson's war. The most important reason for this is because he was fully informed of both sides of the argument regarding Vietnam, yet he still opted to take the power given to him by Congress to take escalatory military action. It was his orders that it came down to, and therefore shows that he was mainly responsible for the action, as it was not the only option available to him.